Hello everyone. Welcome back to Oni-chan. That day, an immortal sphere was sent down to Earth. It had the ability to copy the form of all things in the world. At first, it transformed into a rock. By chance, a dog died on that rock. So, it took the form of the dog, since this was its first time having the shape of a living being. It didn't know what to do except walk. Luckily, it found the owner of the dog. The boy took it into his home and fed it. This was the first time it felt warmth. So, it began to live with the boy. He lived in a ruined village. Everyone in the village had left this snowy land to go to a paradise full of food. So, the boy decided to do the same. He wanted to leave this desolate place and find a new horizon. First, he drew the faces of everyone on the wall. Then, he packed his belongings to leave. On the way, he saw signs left by the villagers. This made him happy, believing he would find them. And so, the days passed. By accident, he fell into an ice pit and got injured. But since there was no medicine, he could only bandage it crudely. Even though his wound became more and more infected, he still believed he would find the villagers. But soon, his hope was crushed, because everyone had already died before they could find their paradise. This drove him into despair, leaving him to hold onto the lifeless dog. And so, the two returned home. By then, his body had grown weaker and weaker. He realized that he was not going to make it. So, he sat on his familiar chair and could only say, "Don't forget me, okay?" And his soul was reunited with everyone. At that moment, when it touched him, it suddenly transformed. And so, it continued the journey in place of the boy. But since it didn't know how to find food on its own, it kept dying and reviving over and over again. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a little girl named March was playing house. When she returned home, she asked her mother, "When will I grow up?" "When you stop wetting the bed," her mother replied. Because March was so innocent, her family was always cheerful. Suddenly, the neighbor girl, Perona, led March into the forest to hide. But they were captured by a group of people. March had been chosen as a sacrifice for what they called a god. On the surface, everyone seemed happy and congratulated March. But at home, her parents could only hold her and cry. Because March's village was just a small colony, they had no power to resist. The next morning, they prepared to take March away. As they entered the forest, March suddenly ran away. Fortunately, Perona rushed in to stop them. Unexpectedly, she fell into a lake. Suddenly, she saw a monster. This terrified them, and they ran away. When it recovered, March realized it was a human. So, March started following him. At that moment, March asked, "Are you immortal?" But he didn't understand anything. So, March broke a pear and gave it to him. Seeing him eat like a dog and even fight over food with her, March started crying. She realized he was like a child. So, March taught him to say, "Thank you." While sleeping, March dreamed of everyone. She realized that if she ran away, other children would be taken instead. So, March decided to go back. Unexpectedly, he kept following March. March said, "I'm not your mom, you know." So, she named him Fushi. Meanwhile, Perona was captured. As she struggled to escape, a giant bear suddenly appeared and attacked them. Perona quickly broke free and ran away. Meanwhile, March was discovered by Hayes. So, she had no choice but to go with them. After making March faint, they quickly took her to the altar. They tied up her hands and feet. Soon, the bear arrived. So, Perona rushed in to save March. But she was sent flying by the bear. Suddenly, as they were leaving, Fushi arrived. They saw that the bear had bitten off half of his body. Yet, he was still able to move. This shocked everyone. At that moment, Fushi transformed into a dog to fight it. No matter how injured he was, Fushi could heal himself. So, he kept biting the bear until it collapsed. Suddenly, Hayes untied March and said, "You may survive, but you must return to my kingdom." Seeing Fushi, March immediately fed him. Unexpectedly, he was able to say thank you. The next morning, Hayes took them all away. Suddenly, they met the old woman who had chosen March. It turned out she was just a slave as well. When they stopped by a lake, Fushi transformed back into a human. March innocently said, "I will be his mother." Then, they all arrived at the kingdom of Yanome. Seeing the food there made March very excited. As soon as Hayes said she would treat them, March ate everything. Suddenly, March remembered her parents. She wanted them to know she was safe. so she pressed her handprint onto a letter to send to them. After that, Hayes took them to eat noodles. Since March was born in a remote village, this was the first time she had eaten such delicious food. Unexpectedly, right after they finished eating, they lost consciousness. At that moment, Fushi was imprisoned, because their true goal was only to capture Fushi. They forced the slaves there to attack him. So Fushi transformed into a dog and ran away. But he was immediately captured by Hayes. At that moment, as March pulled the arrow from Fushi's body, she handed it to Perona. Suddenly, Fushi woke up and dug a tunnel to escape. Then the two of them encountered the bear, which was very weak. She saw that its body was covered in wounds caused by humans. March realized how pitiful it was, so she tried to take care of it every day. But in the end, it still couldn't survive. At that moment, Fushi felt the bear's gratitude toward March. Meanwhile, Perona did everything she could to escape, but she couldn't abandon her little sister. Taking the chance, she also rescued the old woman. When she saw Perona trying to take the bear's head, March stopped her. Perona explained that she needed to prove to the village that they no longer had to offer sacrifices. But March said, "Don't you think it's too cruel, not wanting to hurt March?" Perona left with them. Then, they stole a carriage and escaped. March was very happy because she was about to reunite with everyone. She also had many things she wanted to do. Learn to cook, learn to write, and learn everything about the world, so she could grow up together with Fushi. Unexpectedly, their pursuers caught up, so Perona fought back against them. March saw Hayes aiming an arrow at Perona, so March jumped in to shield her. This sent Fushi into a rage, transforming into a bear to attack Hayes. Meanwhile, Perona recalled their memories together, playing house in front of their home every day. March always cheerfully invited Perona to join. Thanks to her, Perona forgot her loneliness. While Perona was deeply worried about March, Fushi was rampaging through the city. At that moment, March was very weak. "I'm okay, we'll go back to the village soon." But in the end, March didn't make it. Seeing the meal she had saved for her, Perona was heartbroken. She held March and went back to find Fushi. "It's okay now, Fushi, you don't have to fight anymore." So Fushi transformed back. At that moment, everyone thought she was seeking revenge for March. But unexpectedly, March's spirit saw Perona trying to take her own life. She wanted to stop her but couldn't. So March turned to Fushi for help. To her surprise, Fushi actually stopped Perona and transformed to carry her away. When March's parents heard the news, they could only cry in helplessness. Realizing their pursuers were closing in, Perona told Fushi to leave. Fushi continued wandering through the forest. When he was hungry, he transformed into March to pick fruit. Unexpectedly, he encountered the old woman again. She thought March was still alive, but she quickly realized that this person was actually Fushi. The next morning, the old woman was so hungry that she mistook Fushi's leg for fried chicken. So she ran over and bit him. This made Fushi angry, and he climbed a tree. He picked fruit and ate it alone. Seeing that she was also hungry, he threw some fruit down to her. Suddenly, the old woman discovered a map leading out of the forest. So she redrew it, making Fushi curious. She then started teaching Fushi how to write. Not only that, but she also taught him many things. "This is a river. This is a fish. Before eating, you have to say, 'delicious.'" They continued traveling together toward her hometown. By this time, Fushi could speak like a 3-year-old child. That night, while they were resting, Fushi was suddenly attacked. He realized that the tree-like creature resembled him. Unexpectedly, time seemed to freeze. Another man appeared. He said that the creature had stolen Fushi's teenage form, and that it would continue stealing everything, even Fushi's memories, so he needed to fight it. Fushi immediately charged at it in a frenzy, but the creature kept absorbing his powers. Fushi lost his wolf form, so he switched to his bear form, even though the creature moved incredibly fast. But Fushi managed to catch it, and he saw its heart. At that moment, Fushi only had Macha's form left. Using his agility, he pulled out its heart. With that, Fushi won, and all his memories returned. The man in the black cloak appeared again and said, "I created you to preserve this world. The knockers are the ones ruining our plan." The next morning, Piorin led Fushi to a friend's house. In the past, Gugu lived with his older brother. The two of them worked very hard for a better life. Every morning, Gugu took vegetables to the market to sell. But when he returned, he realized his money was gone. Although he suspected his brother, Gugu simply said they could save up again if they worked hard. Suddenly, Gugu saw a lost dog and shared half of his bun with it. The next morning, he helped it find its owner. The owner was so happy that she gave him a ring and said, "Sell this, and you'll never have to sell vegetables again." Before Gugu could ask her name, she had already left. Unexpectedly, by the afternoon, his brother took all their money and abandoned him. From that moment on, Gugu was alone, but he still held onto the ring. Suddenly, a large wooden beam fell. Gugu saw a girl in danger, so he pushed her away. The beam crashed onto Gugu's face. When he woke up, he saw that his face had been destroyed. From then on, he worked for the old man while wearing a mask. At that moment, the old woman brought Fushi back and asked him to perform for them. This made Gugu very excited and led Fushi on a tour. Even though he had seen Gugu's disfigured face, Fushi didn't care at all. Gugu realized that Fushi was like a child, so Gugu taught him all the work around there. In the evening, the old couple jokingly told Fushi to go sell and earn money. This made Gugu angry, and he declared, "Fushi is my little brother." The next morning, this girl came to buy medicinal alcohol, making Gugu very confused. He thought she liked him, but unexpectedly, she liked Fushi, so Gugu pulled Fushi away. The old man advised Gugu, "You need to become a man to be able to woo girls." From then on, Gugu began practicing. The next morning, Rin asked if she could work at the tavern. The old man agreed. When they had just finished dinner, Gugu asked, "Besides transforming, can you do anything else?" Unexpectedly, Fushi not only transformed into a spear but could transform into many things. The next day, Rin came to work. They noticed that she had been injured 3 months ago and still hadn't recovered. So the old man used the medicinal alcohol inside Gugu to treat her. When Gugu realized he was just an experiment for the old man, he became angry and ran off. Since Gugu ran off, no one was left to cook. So Fushi went to the kitchen to boil radishes for everyone to eat. At this moment, Gugu was feeling very sad, so he went back to his farming work. Even though people laughed at him, the garden owner was very kind to Gugu. In the evening, he offered Gugu to stay at his house. But his son wanted to see Gugu's face, so Gugu tried taking off his mask. It immediately scared them. However, the man still offered Gugu to come work there in the morning. At that moment, Gugu wondered, "What if I didn't wear the mask?" So he decided not to wear it anymore. This immediately frightened everyone on the street. Meanwhile, Fushi kept feeding them radishes all day. So the old man told Fushi to go find Gugu himself. On Gugu's side, the owner's son chased him away. Because Gugu didn't want to cause trouble for the man, he quit his job. At this point, no matter where he went to find work, he was always rejected. Suddenly, he saw his older brother lying on the street. So he gave his brother his ring. Gugu realized he was just like a monster. Unexpectedly, he was kidnapped by 2 men. When they were about to sell Gugu, Fushi arrived in time and scared them away. Fushi realized that without Gugu, he couldn't grow. So Gugu and Fushi went to take revenge on those who had mocked him. But Gugu still refused to return to the liquor store. Suddenly, he fainted from hunger. So Fushi created food for Gugu to eat. Then Gugu told Fushi that he and his brother were once adopted by a family. But one day, they left, abandoning the 2 brothers. Unexpectedly, even his older brother left him. At this moment, Gugu hoped that when he died, Fushi would transform into him. Because now, Gugu saw Fushi as his family. In the afternoon, Rin came to take Gugu home. But Gugu refused to return and didn't let Rin see his face. So Fushi ran off to find a mask for him. Meanwhile, Rin was telling Gugu about her family. It turned out that she had always been strictly controlled by her parents and never had freedom. At this moment, Rin realized that Gugu liked her. But he still felt insecure because he always saw himself as a monster. So Rin gave him a hat and said, "Whether human or monster, to me, it's all the same, because you are still you." And just like that, Gugu fell in love with Rin and agreed to go back with her. Meanwhile, Fushi found the mask. Suddenly, he encountered a man in a cloak. The man told him that the enemy was still waiting for him. Suddenly, Rin was taken back home. so Gugu immediately went to help her. This made Rin start to feel safe when she was with Gugu. At this moment, Fushi also returned and gave the mask to Gugu. Suddenly, Rin was discovered by a servant, so Gugu grabbed her and ran, as they used Fushi to distract the servant. Unexpectedly, Fushi's enemy appeared. Gugu realized this was Fushi's foe, so Gugu decided to stay and help him. But unexpectedly, the enemy sent Gugu flying, and the enemy continued attacking Fushi. Gugu realized he could use fire to burn it, but he had run out of alcohol. While Fushi was trying to get Gugu to run away, he rushed home to get more alcohol. Unexpectedly, they saw that Rin's parents had arrived. At this moment, Gugu was drunk and told Mr. Sake to give him more alcohol. So Rin's parents thought, how can we leave our daughter here? But before they could leave, Gugu said, I'm the one who loves Rin the most. When he returned, he saw that the knockers had absorbed Fushi's bare form, so Gugu blew fire to burn it. The enemy was completely engulfed in flames. Gugu thought Fushi was dead, but unexpectedly, Fushi still had one last form, his original rock. So Fushi came back. The next morning, both of them safely returned. Gugu showed off his cooking skills and made food for everyone. This made Rin's parents very happy. At this moment, Fushi met the cloaked man again. The man told him to leave immediately, because that was the only way for him to grow stronger. Otherwise, the knockers would return. But Fushi said, Gugu will help me defeat it. So he decided to stay. Meanwhile, Rin agreed to go home with her parents. 4 years later, Gugu had grown up and trained regularly. Rin often visited the liquor store with everyone. Fushi had also matured, and he had experienced so much of this world. At this moment, Rin was complaining about how her parents were forcing her to get married. Meanwhile, Fushi was sewing an armpit cloth. So Fushi told Rin, why don't you go talk to Gugu, you like Gugu, don't you? Meanwhile, Gugu met his older brother again. Now, his brother had a stable job, so he wanted to apologize to Gugu and make it up to him. But Gugu still couldn't forgive him, because now, he already had another family. So his brother went to thank everyone and asked them to return the ring to Gugu. Rin realized that it was her ring, so she remembered that Gugu was the boy who used to sell vegetables. While Gugu was sleeping, Rin came to tease him. Then, Rin told Gugu that she was about to marry someone else. But Gugu still wouldn't admit his feelings. This made Rin angry, and she stormed off. At this moment, Mr. Sake made a new hat for Gugu that could help him blow fire. So Gugu was very happy and went with Fushi to Rin's birthday party. While everyone was dressed elegantly, Fushi and Gugu only gave Rin a basket of sweet potatoes and a flower. This made everyone whisper and gossip. But Rin was very happy. Suddenly, someone came to pick a fight with Gugu. So Rin wiped him off with a cloth. At that moment, Rin's father forced her to meet her fiancé. Seeing that Rin seemed happy, Gugu decided to leave. Unexpectedly, Rin immediately ran after him. That's when Rin finally realized that Gugu was the one who saved her that day. Suddenly, the balcony cracked. Fushi sensed that the knockers had returned, so he transformed and held up the building to protect everyone. Gugu managed to grab onto its tentacle, so the others pulled him up. Then, he ran inside to find Fushi. Inside, only Rin's parents remained, so Gugu rescued them and brought them outside. When he returned to look for Fushi, Gugu was relieved that he was still safe. Unexpectedly, the knockers had stolen his bare form. Learning from last time, the enemy transformed into stone, so Gugu's fire was no longer effective. Suddenly, the ground cracked again. Fortunately, both of them managed to climb up in time. At this moment, Fushi and Gugu found its core, so Gugu burned it, but it escaped. Suddenly, the enemy reappeared and captured Fushi. As Gugu was in danger, Rin saved him just in time. Then, the building collapsed, so Gugu used his body to shield Rin. Meanwhile, Fushi was still fighting. Seeing how Gugu had risked his life to protect her, Rin kissed him. Suddenly, Fushi felt deep sorrow, and he realized that he had transformed into Gugu. Enraged, he unleashed continuous flames upon the enemy. As they both fell into the water, the enemy suddenly disintegrated, so the knockers fled. At that moment, Fushi immediately went back to find Gugu, but he had not survived, so his brother carried Gugu home. At that moment, Gugu's spirit saw how heartbroken everyone was. So he realized that he had died. But he had no regrets because he had helped Fushi. When Rin woke up, she immediately went to find Gugu. So Fushi disguised himself as Gugu, not wanting Rin to suffer. When Rin asked where Fushi was, he told her that Fushi had died. This made Rin very sad. At that moment, the old couple asked, "Isn't it time for you to leave?" So Fushi departed, taking Gugu's form. Even though they tried to hide the truth from Rin, she eventually realized that Gugu was gone. So Fushi continued on his journey. After leaving the tavern, he still didn't understand why Gugu had to die. So Fushi called out to the man in black. The man said, "You are a special existence, created by me to preserve everything in this world. But the knockers will not leave you alone. They will take everything from you." While Fushi was still arguing with him, he suddenly smelled the scent of the old woman. It turned out that she wanted to continue traveling with Fushi, because she didn't want to leave him alone. But Fushi only wanted to take her home immediately. He feared that if she traveled with him, she would continue to be in danger. No matter how much Fushi tried to drive her away, she kept following him, worried about Fushi. So Fushi, feeling helpless, could only say, "Please don't die." When they arrived at a town, Piorin was happily eating noodles. Fushi was anxious, fearing that the knockers would find them. At that moment, as Fushi was about to pick some fruit, Piorin noticed that Fushi had lost Macha's form. He had even forgotten who she was. Even though he tried, he couldn't remember Macha's appearance. He realized he needed to become stronger. If not, the knockers would truly take everything from him. So Fushi began memorizing everything around him through his pain. The next morning, as they were preparing to board a ship, they were tricked by a girl and led onto the wrong vessel, a ship used to transport criminals. Fushi was taken to an island that was actually a prison for dangerous convicts. When one of the criminals questioned why Fushi didn't have a convict's mark, the girl rushed in and led Fushi away. But he immediately escaped to search for Piorin. Unexpectedly, when he climbed the wall, he fell. This revealed his immortality. At that moment, Tonari's group told Fushi that if he wanted to save Piorin, there was only one way: he had to win in the arena. If he became the champion, he would become the ruler of the island. In the arena, bloodthirsty fighters surrounded him. They relentlessly slaughtered each other to gain power over the island. One young man thought he had already won. But suddenly, Fushi stepped forward, so he threw the hammer at his forehead. Seeing that Fushi was still alive, he continued to attack, but Fushi still didn't die, shocking him into unconsciousness. And so, he had won. Even though he wanted to hide his abilities, it was now impossible. At this moment, Tonari's group kept following Fushi, and they explained to him about this island. This is an island with no laws, where killing is allowed freely. Those who want to escape from this island must fight in the arena. The winner will get a ship to leave. Upon learning that Piorin was imprisoned in a special jail, that night, Fushi asked the man in black for help. But he said, "I will only help you when you need to mature." So Fushi decided to find a way on his own. Unexpectedly, while he was sleeping, someone sneaked up on him. The next morning, Fushi tried everything to rescue Piorin. Suddenly, he was bitten by a mole. So he bit it back. Unexpectedly, Fushi ended up killing it. While he was transforming into the mole, Tonari's owl snatched him away. Meanwhile, in the arena, a woman was continuously winning. While Tonari's group was waiting for Fushi to arrive, unexpectedly, he fell from the sky. So Fushi had no choice but to keep fighting. At that moment, his opponent launched continuous attacks, because Fushi didn't want to hurt him. But his other forms were too dangerous. As he was thinking about whether there was a safer form, suddenly, Fushi was able to transform into Piranha. So he easily used martial arts to defeat him. Despite winning, he felt no joy, because Fushi realized that even Piranha had died. Meanwhile, Tonari kept following Fushi, trying to befriend him, but Fushi said, "No matter what, I don't like you." So Tonari told Fushi the truth. It turned out that someone had told her, if she could get Fushi onto the ship, they could change their fate. And she also promised to atone by rescuing Piorin. So Fushi decided to trust Tonari. At this moment, Fushi noticed that Tonari loved writing in her diary. The next day, the battle started again. This time, Fushi's opponent was also a martial artist. Although he moved very well, he was still no match for Fushi. Suddenly, the spectators became overly excited and attacked him. Even though Fushi blocked for him, he was still injured. Fushi realized that this place was truly cruel. Outside, the man realized that Fushi was a good person. And he told Fushi, "The reason I fight is to protect my younger brother." So Fushi promised that he would win and get them out of here. Suddenly, a group of people came to pick a fight with Fushi. So Toneri's group stepped in to help. Unexpectedly, the knockers appeared, and they began attacking everyone. So Fushi lured them to chase after him. At that moment, Fushi transformed into a mole and burrowed into him. But the knockers immediately threw him out. So Toneri's group arrived to support Fushi. As they were in danger, the islanders also helped him. Together, they held the knockers down. Fushi transformed into Piranha, and along with everyone, continuously shot explosive arrows at it. By the afternoon, when it was finally destroyed, Fushi regained his memories, so he thanked Toneri's group for helping him. While they were celebrating together, Fushi opened up to them about everything he had been through. So they also shared their dreams with him. Some wanted to be artists or doctors. Others simply wanted to see which direction the sun rises from. Meanwhile, Toneri wanted to become a writer. When everyone had fallen asleep, Fushi read Toneri's diary. It revealed that she wanted to bring happiness to people. It turned out that Toneri had loved books since she was little. But one day, her father was accused of murder, and they were sent to this lawless island. Because Toneri's father wanted to get his daughter out of there, he joined the arena battles. But the one who won was not Toneri's father. At that moment, she had to search for her father among hundreds of dead fighters. It seemed he had foreseen his fate, so he left Toneri a birthday gift. Since then, Toneri began writing a diary. She met other friends, and they always tried to escape from the island. Until they met Fushi. Someone told her that Fushi would change their fate. So Toneri tricked Fushi into coming to the island. At this moment, Fushi found Pioran. He said, "I will definitely win and get you out of here." And so, the final battle arrived. Unexpectedly, Fushi's opponent was none other than Hayase, the one who killed March. Fushi immediately transformed into a bear and attacked her. But she moved extremely fast. So Fushi transformed into Piranha. Unexpectedly, she asked, "Do you like the gift I gave you?" It turned out she had killed Piranha and everyone in the village. This enraged Fushi, but she moved swiftly and injected Fushi with a sedative. And so, Hayase won. At that moment, she lied to everyone, saying that Fushi belonged to her, and that he would change the fate of the island's people. So all the islanders supported her. When Hayase took Fushi to a room, she only wanted to get close to him. Meanwhile, Toneri's group was rushing to rescue Fushi. But by the time they arrived, Hayase had already taken him away. And so, they were surrounded. Unexpectedly, Fushi appeared just in time to stop her. It turned out that what they had taken away was just a shell he had created. At that moment, Fushi proposed that she give them a ship to leave, and he agreed to stay on the island with her. Toneri was given a boat by her, but she only chose children under 7 years old to go with her. Unexpectedly, just as they were about to board the ship, she turned on them and knocked Fushi unconscious. Although they made it onto the boat, Toneri decided to return alone to rescue Fushi, because she realized he was in danger. At that moment, Toneri thought Fushi was imprisoned, but he had already escaped on his own, and he scolded Toneri for coming back. That night, Fushi and Toneri temporarily hid in a cave. She told Fushi about her father. The truth was that Toneri's father had killed her mother. So Toneri thought her father was a worthless man. But Fushi said, "Even if your father was a demon, you are not, because you saved me." That night, she dreamed of a happy family. The next morning, as the two were about to leave, the man in the black cloak warned them that the knockers were coming. So Fushi immediately turned back. Unexpectedly, this time, the knockers had possessed the corpses of the islanders and turned them into zombies. So Fushi fought back. Toneri realized their weak point was in their hearts. As she was in danger, her group unexpectedly returned, so everyone fought together. Suddenly, the young girl was captured, and he turned her into a zombie and attacked Mia. So Fushi quickly took Mia away. At that moment, she needed to stop the bleeding, but Fushi couldn't create medical supplies. This made Fushi blame himself and decide to destroy the knockers. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. and he was absorbed by the knockers. So the chubby boy rushed in to save Fushi. And he also turned into a zombie. Meanwhile, Hayase was still observing the zombies. The knockers tried to take over her body but failed. As she aimed for Toneri, Fushi appeared just in time to hold her back. But Toneri was in danger. So he immediately burned the zombies to save them. Unexpectedly, 3 zombies remained on the island. And they were his friends. Everyone was heartbroken and couldn't bring themselves to harm them. Suddenly, Hayase rushed in and captured Toneri to threaten Fushi. She said she would kill the children for him, because she wanted Fushi to be the most beautiful existence in her eyes. And Hayase was willing to do all the dirty work for him. Suddenly, Toneri woke up and dragged Hayase into the sea of fire with her. Fortunately, Fushi managed to save them in time and injected Hayase with a sedative. At that moment, since Toneri didn't want her friends to remain in their zombie forms, Fushi decided to free them. Seeing the bodies of his 3 friends lying before him, everyone was devastated because those children didn't deserve to die. So Toneri made a decision. They decided to change the island together instead of abandoning it. Meanwhile, Fushi left with Hayase because he didn't want to burden them anymore. When Hayase woke up, Fushi asked her what her goal was. "I just want to be by your side because I love you," she said. She was even willing to let Fushi kill her so that he could gain her power. But Fushi couldn't accept it and left. Suddenly, the knockers appeared again. When Fushi reached the mainland, he found Piorin still waiting for him. But afraid of bringing trouble to her, Fushi left again. Then he suddenly remembered that she was out of money. Worried that Piorin would go hungry, he returned to give her some fruit. The next morning, he realized that if he left without a word, she would keep waiting forever. So Fushi went back and wrote her a letter. But he still felt uneasy and decided to watch over her for a while. Fushi realized that Piorin could still live well without him. Suddenly, the man in the black cloak appeared again and said that she didn't have much time left. Because her life was nearing its end, Fushi felt that human life was too fragile. When he returned to give Piorin another blanket, she caught him. Piorin was overjoyed, and they decided to travel together. By staying with her, Fushi gained a lot of knowledge and life experience. Fushi set his own rules. If he sensed knockers nearby, he would immediately flee to keep Piorin safe. At this time, she told Fushi about her wish. She wanted to be young again because she was once very beautiful. Piorin wanted to enjoy every bit of happiness in life, but her time was running out. Piorin began to suffer from elderly memory loss. This worried Fushi, who tried his best to care for her. He felt that she was slowly disappearing from him. Then one day, Piorin suddenly became very clear-headed. She told Fushi, "It's going to rain soon. Go bring the dried fish inside." But he never expected that it would be the last time he saw Piorin. The one who always cared for him like her own grandchild. The one who taught him everything and watched him grow. Fushi lost his sense of direction in life. Then he found a message Piorin left for him. She wrote, "Just do what you want to do. Like I did." Before passing away, Piorin spoke to the man in the black cloak. "In my next life, let me be someone who can help Fushi, even if I forget who I once was." He granted her wish and allowed Piorin to go to heaven. In the end, Fushi continued his journey. Following her final wish, Fushi decided not to meet anyone. He lived alone on an island every day, never changing his form for a long time. Now, he appeared as a middle-aged man, eating knockers, though the reason was unclear. Suddenly, the beholder appeared and spoke with Fushi. Through their conversation, Fushi learned that danger was approaching, but he resisted the beholder's orders. He transformed into a crab and fled into the ocean. For the next 2 years, he took on various forms. From fish to shrimp, he even befriended them, until the beholder pulled Fushi back to the island, forcing him to face the knockers that were hunting him. Fushi had chosen this life of solitude because he still held onto the same belief as before. He didn't want to suffer again, watching the people he cared about die. However, he decided to leave, because the beholder told him that knockers were attacking innocent people outside the island. Perhaps it was just a lie to lure Fushi out. Suddenly, a girl named Hisame appeared, the granddaughter of Hayase. Speaking of Hayase, let's recall Season 1. In the events of the past, Hayase was obsessed with Fushi, but she was attacked by knockers. Whether she survived or not was unknown. However, seeing this girl now, Everyone could already guess her fate. At present, Hisame was leading a religious group called the Guardians. She unexpectedly sought out Fushi, offering to serve him willingly. That night, Hisame's group ventured into the forest with Fushi. Now, Fushi felt uneasy being around this girl, so he went to sleep under a nearby tree. Suddenly, Hisame approached him, revealing her arm, which was infested with a knocker. Immediately, Fushi jolted awake. Seeing this, he raised his sword, attempting to remove the strange knocker from the girl. But Hisame defended it, claiming that this knocker had been passed down through generations in her family, and that it was the symbol of the Guardians. Next, Hisame stated that she was Hei's reincarnated. Unexpectedly, she apologized to Fushi, then walked away, leaving him confused. The beholder appeared, explaining Hisame's situation to Fushi. When a body no longer has the strength to sustain itself, the soul or essence, called Phi, can escape its vessel to do as it wishes. If a Phi has a strong enough will, it can inhabit a new body. Just like how Hei's soul entered Hisame. However, the memories would be reset, so it wouldn't significantly affect the girl's personality. But Hisame would always be bound to follow the will of the possessing soul. And that will was a deep love and devotion to Fushi. At dawn, Hisame's group and Fushi set sail from the island. Now, they arrived at a new location, a village that had been attacked by knockers. Hisame volunteered to scout the area in Fushi's place, knowing that if he went, the knockers might strike again. That night, Fushi met two strangers. They introduced themselves as doctors, sent to assist the fishing village. Now, they were getting to know him. They reported the current situation of the village. Just then, Hisame's group returned and overheard the conversation. After exchanging background information, Hisame invited them, along with Fushi, to rest at a lodging house in the village. Now, everyone gathered and enjoyed dinner together. When they drank a liquid that Hisame had her people bring, suddenly, Fushi and the male doctor collapsed, unconscious. Unexpectedly, the remaining female doctor was unaffected. She explained that her body had developed poison resistance over the years through accumulated experience. Now, Hisame sensed that something was wrong. She quickly ordered her men to capture the female doctor. Just then, Ligard appeared and took down the soldiers. Now, the ego of Hei's inside Hisame whispered that this woman was actually Toneri. Based on the story and their appearance, the unconscious male doctor was likely Sandal. Suddenly, Toneri lunged forward, using a knife to try and remove the parasite from Hisame's body. However, the knocker reacted immediately, attacking Toneri's arm directly. Toneri quickly reacted, cutting off the tentacles clinging to her. At the same time, she commanded Ligard to use his claws and knock Hisame unconscious. However, the knocker still controlled Hisame's arm, and it swiftly manipulated her body to escape through the window. Though Toneri resisted, the tentacles had burrowed deep into her, and due to exhaustion, she collapsed soon after. The next morning, Fushi woke Upand was led by the village chief to meet Toneri, who was now in critical condition and being cared for by Sandal. At this moment, Fushi still didn't know their true identities. In her final moments, Toneri requested to be by Fushi's side, so he agreed. Fushi sat by the bed, listening to Toneri talk about everything she had done over the past 40 years, and the reason she chose to live in solitude. Hearing this, Toneri advised Fushi to seek comrades to stand by his side. However, Fushi did not want to witness any more losses, so he remained steadfast in his solitary life. Before passing away, Toneri asked Fushi to let her see all the forms he had ever transformed into. As a farewell gift, Fushi transformed one by one from his default form. First, the nameless silver-haired boy, then the children in Toneri's group. Unexpectedly, Fushi realized he could not transform into Toneri and Sandal. This made Fushi happy because it meant they were still alive. But he had no idea that, at that very moment, his close friend was on her deathbed. When Fushi said he was grateful to the owner of Ligard, Toneri passed away with a smile on her face. Before she died, she asked Fushi to make good use of her form, because she had trained her body to resist poison for many years. When Fushi tried to ask for Sandal and Toneri's real names, he was refused. Sandal said, "You just need to know that they were very important to you, Fushi." After that, Fushi left. Standing atop a mountain, Fushi transformed into Toneri. He accidentally touched her diary along with Jenna's seal in his palm. After reading the diary's contents, Fushi broke down upon realizing his dear friend had passed away. At that moment, he began to understand the meaning of companionship. Venturing deep into the forest, Fushi came across Hisame, injured in one arm. She then promised not to bother him, because there were still other things to do. After assessing the situation, Fushi decided to take Hisame back to her guardians group, in the form of Shin, Gugu's older brother. Not knowing what to do next, Fushi met Beholder again. Beholder then advised him to tour the city and learn about the culture of the new era. Finding the advice reasonable, Fushi saw this as an opportunity to find companions who could understand him. He made a long-term plan, traveling through many cities, using the money he mimicked to experience life, experiencing sleeping in luxurious places, eating, drinking, and reading books to gain more knowledge. Over the decades, the Guardians grew stronger. Now, Heise's descendants always sought out Fushi, but he still managed everything on his own without their help. Until one day, he met Kahaku, the sixth-generation descendant, who was also the first male to inherit Heise's will. Unexpectedly, he came to inform Fushi of an impending crisis. Suddenly, two strangers burst into the room, interrupting the conversation and demanding to capture Fushi. Quickly, Kahaku drove them away, while Fushi swiftly transformed into a rat and hid in a potted plant. Continuing to listen about the upcoming crisis, knowing that Heise was obsessed with Fushi, that she was fixated on him and had once attacked Fushi in every way possible. Saying that Fushi was being pursued by the Bennett Church. The Bennett Church believed that he was the cause of bringing the knockers to humanity. The two men earlier relied on this wanted notice to capture Fushi for a reward. Kahaku said that the Guardians, following Heise's ideals, had saved people from the knockers many times under the name, the Immortal Being. Thus, many people also worshipped Fushi. However, since he attracted too much attention, Fushi decided to accompany Kahaku for the time being. Meanwhile, he also took the opportunity to search for his own companions to travel alongside Kahaku's group. Fushi realized that he was truly revered by many. However, there were also those who despised him. To avoid these issues, Kahaku advised Fushi to change his appearance. After trying various forms, he decided to take on Perona's appearance. Seeing Fushi in Perona's form, Kahaku blushed, feeling attracted to this version of Fushi. Simping too much. Well, look who's our teammate. While passing through a forest, Kahaku's group and Fushi accidentally fell into a trap set by Prince Bon, who introduced himself as a noble from the Euryalus kingdom. Bon was an extremely flamboyant man who spoke in a vague and perplexing manner. However, none of his guards seemed to complain about his personality. Initially, Bon intended to capture Fushi, but Fushi easily escaped the trap and confronted him. It turned out Bon's ultimate goal was simply to bring Fushi back to Euryalus. However, intrigued by Bon's eccentric nature, as well as the fact that he commanded many followers, Fushi decided to surrender to the prince. He hoped that with this powerful army, they could help him defeat the knockers. Upon returning to the capital, Prince Bon was warmly welcomed by the citizens for his achievement of capturing Fushi. Immediately, he presented himself before the king, boasting of his achievement, hoping that he would be granted the throne. But life isn't a dream, as the king was determined to pass the throne to Bon's younger brother instead. Thus, the king and everyone held a grand banquet. Now, Fushi and Kahaku were given new outfits by Prince Bon's attendants. Afterward, Bon led them both to the banquet table. There, they met Bon's sister and his younger brother, the heir to the throne, along with the queen and the king. They quickly realized how friendly everyone was, treating Fushi as a guest rather than a prisoner. Because they knew he was the Immortal Being, they also understood that he could easily escape from here. So instead of imprisoning Fushi, they debated what to do with him next. At that moment, Kahaku mentioned Tonari's journal. Fushi learned that this book had been published and widely sold across various nations. Instantly, Fushi became furious, suspecting that Kahaku's people had stolen his journal. Since he had once taken Tonari's form when meeting Heise's descendants, he felt that his late friend's privacy was being exploited. So Fushi stormed off in anger. However, He was quickly recaptured by Prince Bon while in his rat form. Knowing that the Euralis kingdom had captured Fushi, Cardinal Saya of the Bennett Church requested an audience with the prince and the king. However, Bon swiftly refused on behalf of the king, for reasons that remained unclear. After that, Bon escorted Fushi to a private chamber for him to rest. However, Fushi transformed into lizard and flew away. But Bon easily caught him once again. In the end, Fushi shouted at Bon, saying he couldn't bear staying in this place. At the same time, the fear of attracting the knockers overwhelmed him, as if pouring out all the sorrow deep in his heart. Fushi declared he was ready to offer himself to the knockers, if someone dear to him were to die because of them again. Immediately, Beholder appeared and reminded Fushi, saying, "That would be useless because I can start over." But Fushi remained determined. At that moment, Bon also heard these words. At that moment, Bon understood Fushi's feelings, so he looked straight into Fushi's eyes, affirming that he would create a new world for Fushi. Therefore, if he wanted to change himself, he had to leave the past behind. Hearing these sincere words, Fushi felt as if he had been enlightened by this strange prince. The morning in the capital was filled with news of Prince Bon's achievement, because he had captured the immortal being. After thinking about Bon's words, Fushi recalled what he had told himself the night before, and decided to stay in this place. So Fushi asked how they would handle it if the knockers attacked from underground, and Bon explained that he had planted bombs all along the underground paths of the city, so he had no fear of clashing with them. But Bon spoke in a playful manner, making Fushi uncomfortable and causing him to leave immediately. To prove that he meant what he said, he held a press conference, announcing that he would go on an expedition with the immortal being to help the people of neighboring regions fight against the knockers, while also clearing Fushi's name before the Bennett Church and those who resented him. On Fushi's side, fearing that the knockers would attack him and endanger the people, he chose to rest outside the city. Seeing that Fushi intended to sleep in loneliness, Bon had walls built for Fushi, so he could rest more comfortably. At this moment, Bon attempted to communicate with Beholder, asking if Fushi fulfills his duty, what will be his reward. Through Fushi, Bon learned that the answer was freedom. Satisfied with Beholder's response, Bon left, but not without reminding him, "Don't go running off anywhere. Even if you go to the ends of the earth, I'll still find you." The next morning, Hokoa took Fushi to the stables to choose a horse from among them. As Fushi hesitated over which horse to pick, suddenly, a white horse bit his leg as if to say, "Take me." Amused by the horse's actions, Fushi chose it. Suddenly, a loud shriek came from Prince Bon. It turned out he had dropped his handkerchief into a pile of manure. When Fushi was about to help, a servant quickly retrieved the handkerchief. Surprised by the servant's dedication, Fushi went to meet him while he was washing the handkerchief by the riverbank. The servant introduced himself as Todo, who would accompany Fushi on the upcoming expedition. Through their conversation, Fushi sensed the affection Todo had for Bon. From that point, he began to press him for confirmation. So, Todo awkwardly ran away. After some time, the prince kept his promise and led a grand procession through the kingdom, where he publicly declared that Fushi was a holy warrior, not the demon the Bennett Church had been spreading rumors about. Afterward, they left under the disapproving gaze of Cardinal Saya. Recently, people started to question whether Prince Bon was truly a good person. What was the motive behind his actions for Fushi all along? Let's rewind time back to when Bon was a child. Bon had the ability to see ghosts and was very close to an unnamed spirit, who would always tell him stories about the immortal being whenever he slept. From its appearance, we know it was Toneri. Additionally, Bon was acquainted with two other spirits, Fen, a friendly ghost in the kitchen, and Auto, a spirit who always trained Bon in combat whenever he had free time. Because of his ability to see ghosts, everyone in the castle was concerned about Bon, but they believed his ability was a fabrication, especially the queen, when she heard that Bon had fallen in love with a beautiful girl who had been embroidering a handkerchief. It was the last straw. She insisted on bringing in an exorcist to cleanse Bon, and unexpectedly locked him in a room while firing the girl, along with everyone involved, tightly bound to the bed. Bon woke up to see the embroidered handkerchief with flowers from the girl he loved. That was why Bon was so determined to retrieve the handkerchief, even if it had fallen into a pile of manure. At the same time, 3 ghostly friends came to visit him, including Toneri. She tried to assure Bon that the immortal being was real. Toneri told him that if he went to find Fushi, he would learn who she truly was. She then promised to meet him again and left in the night. 15 years later, Bon happened to find his father's will. When he opened it, he discovered that the throne would be passed down to his younger brother. This made sense, as Bon had only spent money on shopping for himself, his mother, and his sister. Meanwhile, Bon's younger brother had used his allowance to repair their house and help build with the people. However, Bon wasn't ready to give up on his dream, so he began thinking seriously about how to win the people's favor. Later, Bon learned about the immortal being through a bounty poster. He also recalled Toneri's words from his childhood, realizing that the immortal being was indeed real. So he set out to find Fushi. And after a year of effort, he finally found Fushi in the form of Perona. Behind Fushi were the spirits of Oniguma, March, Guru, and Toneri. They even sent their greetings to Bon. Seeing Toneri, the one who had told him stories every night, returning to the present, the first destination of the expedition and Kahaku's guard was Royce village. One night, while camping near the village, as Bon was gathering his soldiers, Fushi noticed he was using Todo as a chair and protested. Fushi then told Bon that Todo had feelings for him, while Fushi was unaware that Todo was willingly doing this. Upon realizing that his male servant had feelings for him, Bon looked at Todo differently and demoted him, leaving Todo feeling saddened. After that, Fushi found Todo hiding nearby and apologized for his actions. Even more surprisingly, Fushi met Bon's younger sister, who was hiding in a crate. Todo mentioned that Bon had many good qualities, although he was somewhat eccentric. But it was because of his unique personality that Todo became wholeheartedly loyal to Bon. The next morning, the expeditionary group arrived at Royce village. Together with Fushi, they provided weapons and supplies to the villagers to fight against the knockers. When the army was about to leave, Beholder suddenly appeared and announced the Naka's attack. It seemed that Bon had heard the warning from him, so he quickly ordered the entire army to turn back and support the villagers. Ignoring Bon's strange reaction, Fushi, along with his teammates, quickly defeated the knockers by hugging a bomb and diving into a ravine to explode the enemy. After the battle, Fushi was surprised that the prince could remember each soldier's name to call the roll, even though they all looked alike. That evening, Todo informed Fushi that many people under Bon's command had volunteered to serve him, because he genuinely cared for each of his soldiers. Throughout their journey, Bon and Fushi's expedition was welcomed wherever they went, and they formed many new alliances. When they reached Uga Castle in the country of Euralis, the lord of the castle begged Fushi to save his daughter's life. Fushi assessed the situation and felt the girl's immense pain. He realized she couldn't be saved, so he ran outside. However, Bon pulled him back and told him to show the lord his full abilities. Fushi agreed. Now, she transformed into the girl and separated her soul from her body. In the end, what was left for the father was just an empty shell. Despite that, the lord was deeply grateful. When everyone had left, Bon was the last to depart. Suddenly, a voice came from inside. To his surprise, the body began to warm up and breathe again. This startled Bon, and he hurriedly left. That evening, at the campsite, Prince Bon received a letter from the Lord, saying that his daughter had truly come back to life. After speaking with Fushi, Bon made a selfish decision, saying, "I won't reveal the ability to resurrect the dead to Fushi." The reason was that Bon feared Fushi would revive his old teammates and then abandon him. If that happened, Bon wouldn't be able to claim the throne as he wished. Moreover, Bon also realized that Beholder seemed to know about Fushi's ability, which made him even more determined to keep it a secret. The next morning, at the request of everyone, the army decided to visit the city to relax. Bon agreed to take them for a break. Once they arrived, Kahaku bought Fushi a romance novel, hoping that he would understand more about human love. Fushi, however, wasn't very interested, and seemed to be focused on a doll instead. Kahaku, seeing this, was amused, and guessed that it must be the daughter's interest. Later, Kahaku and Fushi accidentally ran into Todo and his daughter. While the group was buying cloth, they all soon found out that she was his daughter. Todo then talked about it during lunch with everyone. In fact, the girl had initially wanted to apply to be a servant, but it didn't work out because she was too overweight. Therefore, Bon immediately hired her as a chair. That night, Fushi, in Perona's form, was reading a book that Kahaku gave him. Suddenly, Bon passed by the tent and was surprised to see Fushi playing with a doll. Fushi said that it was due to the influence of Macha's wish, so he had to take the doll. A while later, Kahaku walked by. Now Fushi pulled him over to thank him for the pretty good novel he had given. Taking advantage of this golden moment, Kahaku pulled Fushi to a place under the starry sky, then confessed his desire to marry Fushi. Surprised by Kahaku's confession, Fushi was stunned and didn't have time to react, when he was suddenly hugged by Kahaku. Unexpectedly, Bon, who appeared out of nowhere, overheard the confession, along with a soldier beside him, who had tea and cakes ready, standing and eavesdropping like watching a romantic movie. At this moment, there was some resistance in Fushi's body, so he pushed Kahaku and ran to a corner of the tent to throw up. Now he suddenly remembered that he was in Perona's form, so Kahaku followed Fushi inside, unexpectedly forced a kiss on Fushi. Regardless of whatever form he might transform into, this young man is starting to act weird, just like his ancestor. This caused Fushi to continue running to Todo's room, with Kahaku following behind. Unable to take it anymore, Fushi yelled at Kahaku that Perona had been killed by his own ancestor. They were the two people that its guardians revered. Hearing Fushi's words, Kahaku apologized and expressed his gratitude to Fushi for sharing a part of the past. After witnessing everything, Bon ordered Kahaku to obey his commands from now on. In the city, rumors about the immortal being who could resurrect the dead started spreading. Fearing that Fushi might find out about this, Bon took Fushi to a corner of the street to try to dispel the rumors from the people. Unexpectedly, a girl from the Bennett church appeared and walked toward Fushi. She warned him that since the church couldn't capture the immortal being, they would turn to attack those supporting him, specifically Prince Bon, so she persuaded Fushi to surrender. Unexpectedly, Fushi agreed because he didn't want his loved ones to be in danger. At the same time, Bon was also being threatened by Cardinal Saya, because he had spread followers all across the kingdom. He advised him to give up on Fushi, or else they would destroy the Euryalus kingdom. However, if Bon agreed to cooperate, the church would support him in becoming king. Bon was moved by Cardinal Saya's offer. Meanwhile, Kahaku, who was in a nearby alley, overheard everything they said and walked away. Together with Todo, they were preparing to do something. Now, they planned to gather the villagers outside the Bennett church hall. At the same time, they were going to expose the truth that Fushi wasn't a religious figure at the church. Seeing this, Bon pulled Todo down, only to be scolded by her for betraying his friend, for selling out Fushi to the church for his own benefit. Despite this, he clarified that he was reluctantly doing this for the peace of the Euryalus kingdom. Todo didn't care, knowing that the situation outside was spiraling out of control. So, Cardinal Saya appeared with the Lord and Fushi to calm the crowd. The church demanded that the immortal being resurrect the church's elder, the man who had passed away 2 days ago. They wanted Fushi to prove that he was not the demon as rumored. Immediately, Fushi transformed into the elder, but he couldn't resurrect the man. Unexpectedly, the elder's body couldn't awaken. Seeing Fushi fail, Cardinal Saya declared that he was the heretic in front of the people. Immediately, he ordered his men to imprison Bon and his companions. Unexpectedly, Todo fainted from being stabbed by a guard. So, Bon chose to stay behind to take care of her, instead of fleeing with Kahaku. After that, he was knocked unconscious and taken to prison. At this point, he was locked in front of a cliff, while Fushi was awakened by Beholder. He then said that Fushi had been deceived and was now locked in an iron cell, surrounded on all sides by iron walls. Meanwhile, Bon was imprisoned by them. In his frustration, Fushi transformed into Guru and continuously spewed fire at the prison lid, trying to melt it to escape. Inside the prison, Bon remembered the events that had happened from the time Fushi resurrected the princess at Uga Castle to today's church incident. leading him to deduce that Fushi could only resurrect those he had met when they were alive. Or at least those who were on the brink of death. Therefore, the elder's body, having no memory of the soul's existence, was likely the reason Fushi had failed. Returning to Fushi, he was trying everything he could to escape. Suddenly, the church poured molten iron inside, causing the immortal being immense pain. Instantly, Fushi revived over and over in vain. This Bennett church group was preaching based on holiness. But they did the opposite of what they preached. Heavens, bear witness, destroy this wretched church. Meanwhile, Todo woke up and realized she wasn't dead, thanks to the scarf she was still sewing. So she survived, and realized she was imprisoned next to Bon's room. After many days in prison, Bon saw a boy named Chabo, who was said to have lost his mother and was locked up with him for stealing bread. Bon saw the spirit of Chabo's mother and told him that she had died. But Chabo didn't believe him. Cardinal Saya came to inform Bon that there would soon be a trial for his heretical acts. His family sent money to bail him out, but the church refused, because they believed it was money created by Fushi. The next morning, Bon was interrogated about his encounter with the immortal being and the reason why he was so adamantly supporting him. Bon sincerely answered simply that the ghost had guided him. Todo, in the room next door, overheard this, and began to understand why the prince often talked to himself. Every day, prisoners were given a portion of bread to eat. Chabo, being kind, only ate half and saved the rest for his mother. But this young man Bon, having been wealthy since childhood, thought that amount wasn't enough, so he took the portion of bread from the boy, which made Chabo angry and slap him on the face. Todo knew about this and reluctantly gave her portion of food to him. Day after day, Prince Bon was continuously interrogated by the church, until one day, they demanded that he prove he had seen the ghost. Guided by the spirit of Mother Chabo, Bon describes her appearance and points out a soldier nearby as the one who killed her, causing a separation between Chabo and her son. To the amazement of the church group, Bon accurately describes his mother's image. This almost breaks Chabo. It causes him to collapse and eat all the breadcrumbs he had saved. Meanwhile, Bon begins to doubt his dream of becoming king. Perhaps it was not a dream, but just his selfish desire. Suddenly, one day, Bon's prison cell falls into the abyss. Due to the balanced design and being connected to Todo's room, since he had always given his food portion to Bon for many months, it caused Todo to lose weight. Leading to this situation, quickly, Bon breaks the wooden floor of his cell to balance it out again, before the crocodiles below can devour him. This prison is too dangerous. Bon negotiates with the church that he voluntarily sacrifices himself to stay, in exchange for the freedom of Chabo and Todo. But they coldly refuse him. Turning to Fushi, 11,049, that's the number of times Fushi must die and come back to life. Through this process, he gradually imitates heated iron, with stronger regenerative abilities than before. Fushi covers himself in lava and rises up from the metal block. Before the church can cool the metal with water, he transforms into Ligard, just in time to escape. Cardinal Saya still thought they had successfully stopped Fushi. At the prison on the cliffside, Fushi successfully defeats the guards, quickly using the heat from the lava to break the iron bars. At the same time, he feeds the crocodiles below with food laced with tranquilizer and rescues Bon. The Bennett church doesn't know that Fushi has escaped, so he creates a fake body of Bon with Todo, to fake their deaths to deceive them and then leave. However, Bon suggests that they leave first, so he explains that the church's punishment of him was not because of a crime, but because they wanted someone to confess to the crime, because they needed witnesses to threaten the people, with the intent to turn Fushi into a demon. The existence of the immortal being as a living saint threatened their faith. Therefore, Bon's death was useless. What the church needed to hunt down were heretics. Until they were satisfied, this affected family and friends. So Bon suggested that it was right to let him stay. When Bon admits his sins, they promised to absolve him. Understanding Bon's meaning, Fushi agreed to leave. The next day, the church asked him to explain about the two bodies. At this point, he made up a story about a demon, a teammate of Fushi, who came to kill Fushi along with the two of them. And the church believed Bon was telling the truth. So they suggested he swear loyalty to the church and refuse Fushi. So he replies, "No way, because he will be Fushi's friend until the end." This makes them uncomfortable and signals to handle Bon. The execution day arrives. Bon confides with his two spirit friends. Through this, we also learn Bon accepts sacrificing himself to become a villain, and willingly offers himself to the church, so the church can use him to threaten the people. Bon chooses to lie to Fushi, knowing for sure that he would try to stop him. Now, kneeling before the guillotine, the Prince Bon is now more mature than before, and he entrusts his dreams to his family, so he can pass away. At the execution, no one understands why, but the people, including the church council, all faint. However, when Cardinal Saya checks Bon, he is dead. He smirks, thinking that this strange phenomenon was caused by a demon. But in the end, the prince could not escape, and they didn't know. At this moment, Bon was not dead, but he woke up somewhere beside Fushi. Now, he had Bon stretched out in the castle, to witness his family faking a funeral for him. When the funeral was completed, Bon's family gathered, welcoming him back, much to his confusion. At this point, Fushi explains. After the conversation with Bon in the prison, Fushi seemed to have anticipated that the prince would suddenly offer himself. So, he and Kahaku made a plan to free Bon. Immediately, they created a very powerful tranquilizer, then scattered it all over the city, then created a scene as if Bon had been executed. This made Bon incredibly grateful to Fushi when he heard those things. Now, he was even happier than his desire to become king. After that, Bon changed his entire appearance, to start a new life with a different identity, without fear of being discovered by others. When Bon was walking with Kahaku, he saw Todo, now with her real name, Torta. This shocked Bon, knowing that she was his crush when he was younger. It turned out that Torta's father used to be a tailor for Bon's family, but was fired because of a rule. The prince is not allowed to meet women outside the castle for long. So, Torta's father was asked to leave, when he broke into the castle and left a handkerchief for Bon. Additionally, her weight gain was because there was a new bakery shop near her home. Unable to resist, she ate recklessly until her body became obese without realizing it. After that, they watched fireworks on top of the castle with all their loved ones, including Chebo and Fushi. At this point, Bon confessed his feelings to Torta, not forgetting to promise to take care of little Chebo. The next morning, they prepared to send Fushi off on a new journey. Suddenly, Fushi felt pain from someone. Following the trace, he discovered that the sensation was coming from Kahaku. At this point, Kahaku was taking Knocker's parasitic on his arm. Unexpectedly, the Knockers took control of Kahaku's hand and wrote in the sand, "Please don't kill me." It then began to explain that the Knocker's motive in this world is to free humans from the pain of their mortal bodies. At the same time, to bring them to a world where they can live eternally. This is why the Knockers hate both Beholder and Fushi, because their ideal is to preserve the world. Hearing this, Beholder appeared and deduced that the origin of the Knockers was lost souls, which caused them to mutate into Knockers. Beholder believed that their philosophy was misguided. If what they said was true, then why did they also destroy animals next? He announced the next location where the Knockers would attack. That is the Bennett Pose Church. Fushi immediately transformed into a bird and flew there, followed by his horse. Feeling that something important was about to happen, Bon quickly packed his things to go with the immortal being. Now, he fully understood the reason the Knockers kept attacking humans, even though the immortal being no longer existed in its invincible form. But Fushi could still destroy them without any worries. Fushi teamed up with Guru and Sandal to rescue all the people, without harboring any hatred toward the church. When Beholder informed him that many people had gathered at the church, where the Knockers were about to attack, Fushi transformed into the church's elder to announce to everyone to run away quickly. Thanks to all the efforts, he saved many people, but some still lost their lives. Fushi was stripped of some identities by Knockers, due to helping those who escaped. The battle ended just as Kahaku and Bon arrived. Fushi appeared before both of them in an exhausted state. After that, based on Fushi's records, the group learned that the identities that were lost were Guru, Shin, Perona, and Ligard. After a while, the Knockers on Kahaku's hand pointed out the location of the Knockers, who were holding the identities stripped from Fushi. Hearing this, he immediately transformed into a wolf and ran there. At this moment, the knockers were hiding in the swamp, a place full of advantages for them. Despite knowing it was a trap, Fushi still charged in. Thus, Fushi was continuously attacked by the knockers, causing him to lose the shapes of Oniguma, Sandal, and Pioran. Fortunately, the horse that had been following Fushi earlier timely rescued him by pulling him to jump off the cliff. In the panic, Fushi realized the horse had the ability to heal itself. Just like him, Beholder revealed that the knockers was created by him to assist Fushi. It was made from a part of the immortal being's body, so it only had the ability to regenerate. Knowing this, Fushi wanted to return to fight the knockers, to regain the lost identities. But the horse stopped him, because if he returned now, it would be like handing himself over. After some thought, Fushi asked how to detect the presence of the knockers. Beholder suggested that he should feel which part of his body was missing. When Fushi realized it was the string on his body, Beholder continued to explain, the things on your body are all connected to your sensory areas. Meaning, if he created a giant ship, Fushi would feel everything touching the ship, as long as he stayed connected to it. Fushi suddenly recalled the horse's act of fishing, similar to Pioran's actions. This made him suspect that the horse was the reincarnation of the old woman. Based on the hints he had, Fushi came up with an idea to defeat knockers. Returning to the swamp, using the knowledge he had learned earlier, Fushi began creating massive trees from beneath the mud, causing knockers to get caught in the branches. Since he was still connected to the trees, Fushi pierced through the knockers with a sword shot from the branch without needing to move. The battle ended, and Bon and Kahaku quickly arrived to assist. Fushi grabbed Kahaku's arm. He was angry, scolding his knockers for giving false information about the enemy. Wasn't it knockers in the swamp that had stolen Fushi's identity? So knockers had borrowed Kahaku's body to write on the ground, apologizing to Fushi, because it had been tricked as well. Suddenly, another knockers attacked them. Immediately, Kahaku and knockers worked together to defeat it quickly. When they destroyed the enemy, the knockers on Kahaku's hand received a message from them. In 1 year, they will attack Grandgill City. If Fushi doesn't arrive, they will kill the parasite. Bon explained that the kingdom of Grandgill was the largest city on the continent. If knockers attacked there, hundreds, even thousands of people would die. When Fushi learned that he could grow stronger by creating his own territory, Bon said there were still 3 months of training left. As for defeating knockers and requesting the Lord to evacuate the people of Grandgill City, Bon would take care of everything. Luckily, there was an abandoned settlement, along with a stranded ship from the Euralis people nearby, which would be the perfect place for Fushi to train. So he bid farewell to Bon and Kahaku, letting them return to the Euralis castle to gather forces and prepare for the upcoming battle. That night, on the ship's deck, Fushi gazed at the moon with determination, vowing to become stronger in the presence of the spirits of his comrades. The first steps of training were difficult, as Fushi realized that he didn't fully understand the principles of his own power. Meanwhile, Beholder reported that Kahaku's guards and the Euralis army were facing knockers. While Bon was trying to negotiate with the Grandgill princess, she was stationed in the city, protecting the people from harm. Her father was gravely ill, and her brother was still away at war. With the news from Bon, who was being hunted by the Bennett Church, the princess refused to cooperate, as she didn't trust him. After many days of training with little progress, Fushi and his horse went down to a small town to ease his mind. On his way back, he felt a pain emanating from a circus. At the circus, Fushi entered to investigate, and discovered 2 skinny children, their bodies covered in black, muddy filth, trapped inside a cage. Moved by pity, Fushi went outside and told the circus owner that he wanted to buy the 2 children. But the man refused. Since this plan failed, I'll just come up with another one. At the same time, after many days of persuading Princess Grandgill, Bon finally succeeded in getting her to agree to cooperate. At midnight, Fushi returned to the theater secretly to free the 2 children. However, while on his way back, suddenly, the little brother of the girl tragically passed away from exhaustion. Fushi had no choice but to bury the boy, much to the sorrow of his sister. Returning to the boat, he took care of the girl, from feeding her to grooming her, making her look cuter than he had imagined. He decided to raise her like a younger sister and named her Echo. when he saw Echo always hugging a jar as if she wanted to say something. Fushi transformed into the girl's little brother and learned that the two sisters communicated through the strange jar. Through communication with the girl, in the form of the little brother, Fushi began to understand the power within himself. Fushi realized he had misunderstood Beholder's suggestion. In order to create his own domain, Fushi had to become one with what he wanted to simulate. Like the blood vessels in the body, once he understood the internal nature, creating a giant ship or a large land area became completely possible. After several days of gathering, Fushi also created forest vines inside the ship. After several days of rooting in every corner of the ship, Fushi successfully began to sense every activity happening inside. 3 months later, Kahaku and Bon returned to the training grounds of the immortal being. The two found Fushi, who now looked almost like a forest god. Then, he invited them to sit down and discuss. The immortal being revealed that his sensory range had increased to 3 kilometers. Fushi could even create a body elsewhere and shift his consciousness there. Moreover, if he senses the knockers near his territory, he can easily destroy them from a distance. Next, he introduces Echo to everyone. Kahaku immediately recognizes that this girl is from the Doki tribe, a tribe of strange people, who communicate through a jar. Fushi transforms into her younger brother and learns that her homeland has been destroyed. After the training, Bon tells Fushi that he must return to Euralis to find some immortal teammates to help them fight. To the confusion of Kahaku and Fushi, the immortal being group will head to the Grand Guild Kingdom first, preparing for a large-scale battle with the knockers ahead. After a long time has passed, after facing many challenges, Fushi's group finally arrives in Grand Guild City. At a restaurant in the city, thanks to the flag in Kahaku's hand, the group learns that the knockers truly interact with each other through images without the need for language. Just like how Echo's tribe communicates through the jar. Meanwhile, in Euralis, based on Bon's request, his younger brother asks a series of harsh questions about faith, loyalty, and sacrifice for the soldiers, so that they have the option not to participate in the upcoming terrible battle. But the prince's warriors are all willing and determined to follow Bon. Suddenly, a soldier steps out, has come to and calls Bon by his true title, Prince. Bon is surprised to hear this and calls the soldier by his full name, Kai. This further reinforces that Bon is indeed the prince, as only the prince could remember all the names of the soldiers and care for them. When the prince asks about Kai's father, he says that his father passed away due to illness, and that currently, no one can bind him to stay. Therefore, he will willingly join the knockers' battle. And a soldier dressed in Bennett church attire, who doesn't know when he joined, follows suit, so the three of them set off to Grandgill. On the way through the outskirts of the kingdom, Bon recruits the final member of the immortal being group. However, Bon still keeps the resurrection a secret and the true identities of the upcoming immortal teammates. At the same time, he instructs Fushi to see them as vessels of the immortal being. Ignoring the discomfort Fushi feels, as he cannot see his teammates as tools to save himself. Now, they introduce themselves one by one. Kai, a hybrid. Hario, a former Bennett soldier. And finally Messer. Next, the prince leads the group to introduce them to the princess. However, Fushi arrogantly demands that the princess hand over all of Grandgill. When she asks what help they need for the knockers' battle, she agrees to help if the group can meet one condition: earn the trust of the people in the court. Back in the room, Bon interrogates Fushi about his rude attitude. At that moment, Fushi expresses his feelings, saying that he has always felt guilty for using the forms of others to fight. Bon knows this, yet still asks him to exploit the new teammates. The prince coldly retorts, "In this situation, if you don't use your power, it means you can't save anyone." He then walks away, witnessed by Echo and Kahaku. A moment later, Fushi happens to meet Kai and Messer, who are sitting and playing chess. Suddenly, Kai invites Fushi to stay and talk. Fushi asks about the scar on Kai's face, and whether he feels uncomfortable with Fushi using his body. Kai immediately shares a bit of his past. "When I was young, I lived with my father and grandmother. Kai was often brutally beaten, and simply waited for something to end the hellish days of his life. But then, when the knockers attacked and destroyed his village, he thought he would be liberated. However, he and his whole family survived. Shortly after, Prince Bon arrived and invited the survivors to join the army. So Kai left his father to join. As time passed, he returned to visit his father, who was bedridden. Now, he apologized to Kai for what he had done in the past, making him feel regretful. However, he also felt fortunate that he and his family were still alive. Therefore, Kai wanted to live as long as possible. Even if he is just a pawn of the immortal being, at least his body and dreams would always exist within Fushi. After the conversation, Fushi notices a cloud of dust pointed out by Echo. At this moment, Fushi feels this is a perfect opportunity to gain the trust of the public. When checking the place with Kai, they discover that it is a collapsed house of the people. To repair it, Fushi transforms into Booze Man and asks to work alone, unseen by anyone. If Bennett's followers find out, he fears the church will hunt him down again. The people around are gossiping about the house, and this news quickly reaches the princess. She is surprised to learn that the house was rebuilt in just one night. Moreover, it was completed by only one person. Now, we learn a bit about Messer's childhood and the princess, who is known by the name Oma. When they were young, they often played chess together. However, Messer was very bad at it. Oma said that if one day he could beat her even once, she would grant him a wish. However, their game was interrupted by a servant, because royalty is not allowed to play with the children of the servants. Returning to the present, Fushi introduces the immortal being group to Booze Man's old residence. Meanwhile, the people in the city hear about Fushi's abilities, and everyone comes to ask him for help repairing their houses. Fushi agrees with one condition: everyone should cover their homes with cloth, and then I will restore their houses alone. When Bon sees the connection between Fushi and the building, he immediately understands the immortal being's plan. Taking full advantage of Fushi's new ability, he rebuilds all the houses in the city, turning the place into Fushi's own territory, just like how he did with the ship before. As a result, if the knockers attack from any direction, Fushi can still protect everyone or counterattack without showing himself. Meanwhile, Hario is training with the soldiers in Grandgill to build team spirit. Fushi happens to watch his match and notices that Hario has dislocated one of his shoulders. But he was unaware until the match ended. When the opponent reminded him, Hario realized and immediately left to find an excuse to go back to his room. Curious, Fushi followed Hario to check on his condition. Hario shared his past. When I was young, I had all my teeth pulled by the church, but I didn't feel any pain. This strange ability made my family think I was possessed, and they abandoned me at the church. However, I had a happy childhood with Sister Silila. She was the one who raised me. But soon after, a new nun appeared to replace Sister Silila. She said that Sister Silila had committed a crime and was punished. Eventually, Hario grew up and became a swordsman. He had been present during the Naka's attack on Bennett before. Afterward, he was found by Bon and invited to join the immortal being group to save Grandgill. A soldier who had fought with Hario earlier interrupted the story, saying that if Hario had felt the pain, he might have been able to save Sister Silila. Fushi was startled and considered using a knife to attack the soldier, thinking he had bad intentions. But after learning that the soldier just wanted to check on Hario's arm, Fushi handed the soldier over to him so he could continue training to build team spirit. Late at night, Kai informed Bon, Hario, and Cam that without the princess's help, they wouldn't be able to rebuild the houses and expand Fushi's territory before the attack. Meanwhile, Messer focused only on playing chess, which made Fushi frustrated because he seemed almost useless. In the evening, Bon shared that he wasn't sure about Mesar's origins, but he thought Mesar might be of royal blood. They had met at a noble tea party hosted by Bon's mother. The group concluded that, although Mesar had an indifferent attitude, he was very close to the princess, which could prove beneficial later. Fushi took this information and returned to continue his work until morning. Meanwhile, Mesar challenged Princess Oma to a game of chess, and reminded her of the promise she made in the past: if he won, she would grant him a wish. That afternoon, Fushi woke up from his sleep and was surprised to see the people of Grandgill destroying their own houses in order to carry out the reconstruction plan. This was exactly what he and his teammates had hoped for, but he couldn't understand why everything had changed so suddenly. Fushi rushed to ask Bon and learned that Masar had successfully convinced Princess Oma. At that moment, Masar appeared and revealed that Oma was his half-sister. She had become the princess ruling the country because their father had chosen her mother over Masar's. Moreover, Oma's brother was on the front lines. She was happy to meet Masar again. But since he had gone missing, Masar decided to protect his sister in their place. Masar presented the drainage map to Fushi's group. Along with other men from the city, they proceeded to examine various drainage routes in Grandguild to find blind spots where the knockers might attack. From there, they made a plan to stop the enemy. Meanwhile, Echo was also busy practicing, trying to contribute in her own way. She helped everyone move their belongings and accidentally overheard them complaining about the dirty water. Echo immediately went to the drainage system, discovered the issue, and informed the villagers. After that, she took Fushi home for dinner. Echo happily mentioned that she had cooked the dinner herself. Moreover, thanks to Echo, the dirty water issue in the city was resolved. Just when Bon's group returned, they saw the cute girl and pulled Fushi in to eat with them. Gradually, Fushi expanded his territory, and the more he felt the emotions of the people in the city. At that moment, a woman collapsed. Fushi immediately transformed into Sandal's form, and rushed to help. In front of her daughter. It turned out that he had helped many people in the city. However, now he also realized that he had his own limitations, that he couldn't save everyone at once, which caused him a lot of discomfort, but there was nothing he could do. Meanwhile, Masar continued playing chess with the princess, and he tried to persuade her to extend the festival by a week, so the soldiers and the citizens could enjoy themselves, and it would also give Fushi time to build the walls. Without anyone noticing, the princess agreed. On the day of the festival, young man Cam, in an attempt to win the affections of his crush, asked Fushi for help in a martial arts battle. So, he transformed to fight, but lost immediately with just one strike. At that moment, Fushi felt someone was severing the connection, so he transformed into Booze Man to drive them away. That night, the soldiers were having a party. When the party ended, they suddenly saw Fushi building the walls. Angry, thinking he was with the church. Because of his past, he had been called a demon. While trying to explain to everyone, suddenly, Cam was hit. Seeing this, Fushi stepped forward and transformed into different forms. At that moment, they realized Fushi was the one who had been helping them all along. The next day, Fushi walked confidently through the city. But it seemed that no one wanted to bother him, because they were very grateful to him. At that point, Bon explained that Fushi had become a hero to them. Suddenly, Princess Oma appeared and blocked their way, with an attitude of great respect for Fushi. Knowing that the castle was the last piece needed to expand their territory, she suggested that Fushi meet with her father, the king, to get his final judgment. But when they reached the king's room, neither of them could find him. Suddenly, Fushi felt someone near him was in pain. He immediately rushed to the location and saw a man lying on a stool. Fushi offered to help, but the man refused, saying it was unnecessary to exert energy for someone about to pass away. At the same time, the princess appeared and said that the immortal being was the king, and he had allowed Fushi to rebuild the entire castle. Later, Fushi destroyed the castle with explosives and helped the residents clean up the rubble. Then, Hokoa appeared with Torta and Chabo. They brought the Euryalus soldiers to support Grandgil one last time. Before the battle began, once everything was settled, Bon took Fushi to a small house, asking him to create the anesthetic he once used to save Bon. Fushi didn't know that the drug would make him unconscious, because Fushi's child form couldn't withstand the poison like Toneri's body could. At the same time, Bon gathered the Immortal group, then asked Beholder to appear to talk with them. When he presented himself, Bon introduced him to everyone and explained, due to his ability to see souls, he had recognized from the beginning that Beholder had always followed Fushi. Next, Bon questioned Beholder why he had the ability to stop the Naka's attacks, but refused to do so, choosing instead to abandon the lives of hundreds of thousands here. Beholder replied that Fushi needed to experience the deaths of these people in order to evolve, and one day Fushi would replace him, in the event that he was no longer around. After hearing these selfish words from Beholder, Masar couldn't control himself and lunged to stab him in the back. Beholder calmly pushed Masara aside and silently disappeared. After the conversation with the creator ended, Bon assured the Immortal group, asking them if they still wanted to sail on this boat soaked in farce. Afterward, Pocoa, along with the soldiers, escorted some refugees back to Euryalus. At that moment, Fushi appeared. He was worried about the safety of Bon, Kai, and Hario, so he advised them to follow the soldiers back to Euryalus for a better new life. Because he wasn't sure if he could protect them in the battle. Of course, they refused, determined to stay with Fushi to the end. As the battle approached, Fushi suggested that if the group found themselves in danger and needed help, they should knock 3 times on any surface to call for his assistance and spread this message to the soldiers. Additionally, Fushi placed several bodies in key positions. In case the immortal being was attacked by the knockers, he could transfer his consciousness to those bodies. The mouse body was placed by the waterway. Boozman was positioned at the Nado gate. Sandal was stationed at the tower. March was set up near the end of Grandgill. Finally, the battle began. Echo sat at the highest point of the castle. She seemed to begin sensing the knockers approaching, and quickly reported it to Fushi. Upon receiving the news, the soldiers evacuated the citizens and prepared for battle. When suddenly, the knockers launched their attack on the walls, marking the start of the battle. The tremors shook the entire fortress, and little Macha's body fell off the connection thread, then opened its eyes, waking up. After the first attack, Fushi reassured everyone, "Don't panic, the fortresses are all my territory. So I will quickly restore the damage to the walls." The knockers created trebuchets, attacking the walls continuously. Grandgill quickly retaliated with branches that rose from the ground, piercing through them, since they were in the immortal being's territory. However, Fushi began to tire from using so much of his power. On Macha's side, she eventually woke up and was found by a villager. He felt sorry for her and took her to a refugee house. Bond took the opportunity to wash his face to stay alert. Then he asked his ghost friends if they had any news about Macha's body. Suddenly, a soldier was poisoned from drinking water. At that moment, someone came with a report that the knockers had polluted the water source. After informing the citizens of the city to stop using the contaminated water, Bon made a plan to divide the troops for defense. Fushi would be responsible for the defense on the west side. Bon and the Immortal Beings group would handle the defense at the front gate and east side. There, Kai asked the Immortal Being to connect the water source to the hydraulic gun he had made earlier, to use in case of emergency. At the same time, he gave Fushi a suit of armor to protect against danger when facing the knockers. Meanwhile, March was with a kind couple who were preparing a meal for her. But the little girl kept calling out Fushi's name, so she ran away through the window. On the west side, Cam's group defended the connection thread, while Fushi expanded his territory to eliminate the knockers and protect the water source. Afterward, the Immortal Being created tents for the team to rest in, while he pushed himself to the point of bleeding from his nose to observe the situation in the city. Noticing the knockers starting to climb the wall, Fushi quickly transferred his consciousness to Sandal's body to assist his team, which caused him to exceed his limit and faint immediately. Without support from the Immortal Being, the walls could no longer be restored, and the knockers immediately breached through the cannonballs, firing from the front, causing panic among the people. Echo appeared, holding a sword in her hand, cutting her hair short. Now, the team was ready to take a fighting stance to protect Fushi. As if fueled with renewed spirit, they calmed down and were ready to battle alongside the girl to protect this place. Fushi woke up, desperately starting to search the city using his sensing ability. He sensed that the number of survivors was significantly lower. Now, the mist cleared, and Kahaku appeared, fighting nearby, so Fushi asked him what had happened. But according to Kahaku's report, nothing had changed since the first attack. Meanwhile, Bon was going to meet the princess to report on the battle situation. Fushi fainted again when he learned that the Immortal team had died. Just then, Bon returned, ordering Kahaku to join Team Cam and the other soldiers in defending the city wall. At the same time, he told them that Team Cam was always keeping an eye on the knockers in his hands, but told them not to worry, as Kahaku still controlled it. Fushi woke up and created the bodies of each Immortal team member. Then, Echo showed him what happened while he was unconscious. Hario and Kai died one after another due to monster attacks. Masar was infested by knockers. So Kahaku coldly ended him immediately. For the reason of protecting Fushi, who realized everything. Fushi stood up with a stronger will than before. Unexpectedly, he rushed out alone to the front lines. On the battlefield, he continuously transformed into various forms, sweeping through the enemies. Seeing the signs of the immortal being's return, it made the soldiers around him rejoice, as if their will to fight against the knockers had been renewed. Learning from the previous fainting incident, Fushi now understood the cause of his condition. When I had a hemorrhage and my vision began to blur, that was a sign of fainting. Because of that, he had to continuously transform when his body started showing these symptoms in order to recover. Hearing his teammates call for help, they needed to destroy the catapult created by the knockers. Fushi immediately transformed into a bird and flew over, using a hydraulic gun to destroy the machine. At the same time, in Masar's form, he discovered a new weapon, a machine gun, then copied it and sent it to all the soldiers, helping them increase their firepower. In a moment of distraction, Fushi lost focus while watching the bullet hit Grandgil, and Fushi was turned into a bear by the knockers. Devoured. However, a miracle happened. The warriors from the Immortal team were resurrected. They appeared just in time to rescue the immortal being in dire straits. Since Fushi had created their bodies, when Bon saw him leaving, he severed the connection from the bodies of the team to the immortal being to bring them back to life. At that time, Kai explained to Fushi how the immortal team could be revived if the immortal being senses the death of any person in the battle. Then the body is recreated and the connection is severed. By doing so, everyone comes back to life. So in the end, everyone understood Bon's intentions behind creating the immortal team. Fushi happily returned to the base. There, he was the mastermind using his sensing ability from his domain to locate his teammates and support them. Every time a team member died, Fushi would recreate them in the right place to fight, since the immortal being had to both support his teammates in battle and defend against waves of knockers invading. When he learned the catapult was located far from the city walls, Fushi couldn't make it there to destroy it. He then came up with an idea: create another catapult, linking its projectile to his body, shooting it to their location and then summoning the immortal team there, asking them to handle the machine. Since the enemy's base was outside his sensing range, Fushi went to check. He found that all three of them had successfully destroyed the catapult. But since it would take a whole day to return, they committed suicide so that he could immediately revive them. Essentially, it was like activating a hack mode, die and then come back to life. 4 days had passed since the battle with the knockers began. Sensing his teammates calling for him, Fushi immediately teleported to them and saw Team Cam tying up Kahaku. The reason was that the knockers infesting his hand had given false information, causing the team to be ambushed and seriously injuring one member. Kahaku explained that he really didn't know the parasite on his hand would betray him. At this moment, Kahaku poured out all his thoughts upon seeing Fushi. He blamed Fushi for always throwing himself into protecting everyone as a duty, even though there was no benefit, and it only harmed his spirit. Kahaku wondered, why didn't Fushi try once to ignore all the cries for help? Let the knockers be, and live a life for himself. These words seemed to touch something deep in the immortal being's heart. He became angry at Kahaku's thoughts and then walked away. On the outskirts, Fushi accidentally encountered the 5-finger hand symbol. Remembering March, he recreated her form and severed the connection, hoping she would come back to life. But unfortunately, there was no reaction, because Macha's soul had already been revived earlier. She was somewhere in the city, searching for the immortal being, while Fushi remained unaware. Meanwhile, Kai and Bon decided to temporarily set aside the battle and left. Masar was called by the princess and was given the sad news: the king had just passed away, and the country was falling into chaos. The kingdom of Grandgil would now be carried on by Oma. Returning home, Fushi continued his work of protecting Grandgil. The situation was becoming increasingly difficult. He had to ensure food for the people staying inside the city, while also supporting the soldiers fighting and defending against attacks from the Naka's catapults. The workload was becoming overwhelming. Suddenly, Fushi received a help signal from Haryo. The immortal being immediately appeared and was asked to recreate his body at a location 1 kilometer away. Due to signs that the knockers were attacking, understanding the situation, Fushi ended his life in front of the people. Witnessing what just happened, they continuously called Fushi a murderer, ignoring the soldier who tried to explain that this was how the immortal team operated. At the base, Fushi reflected on the words of the people earlier, which made him recall Kahaku's words from before. Was everyone's reason for fighting truly worth the effort he put in? Why was he fighting for them when they could still curse him? Was Bon hiding something else from him? Fushi tried to push these thoughts away. Then he continued his duties. Returning to the palace, Masar saw the princess standing on the balcony, but in a position as if she wanted to jump into the deep abyss to commit suicide. He ran to hug her before anything bad could happen. Unfortunately, her body was deeply infested by the knockers. Oma gave her last words to Masar before dying instantly. Overwhelmed with grief, Masar went to ask Fushi to immediately save the princess. Meanwhile, Fushi confusedly explained that he couldn't resurrect this girl. However, Masar kept yelling. Reluctantly, Fushi agreed to do it the same way he had recreated the immortal team's bodies. However, strangely, Oma couldn't come back to life this time. Later, Fushi went to Bon to inform him of the incident, and casually asked about the principle behind resurrecting the dead. However, Bon only apologized and refused to answer until the battle was over. Unable to say anything more, Fushi just smiled and left. He then went to Kahaku, who was being watched by Kai. Fushi complained to both of them about his fatigue. When Kai asked if he wanted to rest, Fushi only gave a forced smile, embarrassed, and left. Sensing something was wrong with his lover, Kahaku quickly escaped with the power of the parasite. He returned to Boo's man's house, his hands full of food. With a big smile, he advised Fushi not to worry anymore, then reminded him to summon the immortal team and have a family meal together, so everyone could be happy like before. At that moment, Fushi began to understand the vague unease in his heart. The immortal being's side is showing signs of defeat. The war with the knockers will never end if he doesn't expand his territory across the world to destroy all of them. However, he doesn't know how long he can endure this attack, until his territory spreads across the entire earth, while the will of the soldiers and himself are gradually exhausting. At the castle, Bon finally met Masar, but Masar's condition was very bad. She was holding Oma's lifeless body, unable to bring her back to life. Bon explained that when she died, the princess's soul chose to live in heaven, rather than return to her body. Masar heard this but still felt powerless. Meanwhile, the knockers were getting closer to killing her. Afterward, the immortal team was summoned by Fushi at Boo's man's dining table. At that time, Kahaku criticized Haryo for his useless death while protecting the church. Kai, on the other hand, was wasting time guarding him, until he carelessly mentioned Oma's death. And finally, all that was left were sounds of fighting from upstairs. A moment later, with his body covered in blood, Kahaku hurriedly ran down, telling Fushi that he didn't mean to harm the immortal team, but it was the knockers on his arm that caused it. Now in a state of exhaustion, Fushi didn't pay attention to his words. Finally, he spoke his heart out. I want to be at peace. Hearing this, Kahaku approached and hugged Fushi to comfort him, but the knockers on his arm turned and attacked Fushi. It continuously stole all of his forms. At that moment, March and the white horse from the beginning appeared and rushed to rescue Fushi, but both were knocked away by it. Realizing the situation was critical, Kahaku grabbed a knife and desperately chopped at his own arm, even though the pain felt like dying and coming back to life. Finally, Kahaku succeeded in getting it removed from his arm. However, unfortunately, he let it escape. The horse, after recovering, began pulling March as if wanting to go somewhere. March understood, climbed up, and told the group, "Stay put. I'll find a way to save Fushi." At this moment, Bon felt as if the city had come to a halt. The buildings weren't being repaired or added to. He wondered, could it be that Fushi is dead? Bon knocked repeatedly on the walls to create a signal, but received no response from the immortal being. Then, he was guided by the spirit of Ligard to where March was. Right there, March asked him to go back to Boo's man's house to help Fushi. Along with March, Bon explained to everyone what had happened at this place. The girl hoped that, with the ability to see souls, Bon could find Fushi's ghost around here. But unfortunately, the nature of the immortal being, which was formed from a sphere by the beholder, meant that there was no soul to manifest. Just then, Echo appeared. She ignored Bon's greeting, and slowly approached the pool of red blood. Echo returned to her original form, now only a sphere, and handed it over to March and Bon. Though she had lost all her forms, Fushi still remained connected to his territory through nerve fibers. March told Bon they should go and eliminate the knockers to retrieve the original form, just like Fushi had done before. Bon sadly replied that it was impossible, because the enemy was continuously multiplying. While the military forces were gradually diminishing, there was no other choice but to wait for death. Hearing this, Echo seemed to understand something and walked away. The girl stood at the highest point of the building, with her arm being parasitized by knockers. She slowly moved toward the brink of death. Suddenly, Bon remembered, when Fushi loses his shape, he will lose his shadow, his voice, and even his scent. He then instructed March, "Go outside and wait. If I haven't returned after counting from 1 to 100, go to Aralis's military camp. Give this handkerchief to the people there, and they will help you." After that, Bon closed the room containing the sphere. He drew his sword and, with all his strength, stabbed it into himself, intending to end his own life. He offered his body to the immortal being, hoping that Fushi could revive. On the other side of the world, Bon awoke in a dream where he was a king, but he discarded the crown and returned to save Fushi. Raising his hand to the sphere, he called out to Fushi and the other souls. It seemed that what Bon had done was effective. Fushi slowly began to remember the fleeting images of Gugu, Toneri, and the immortal group. As for Bon, he was shouting loudly, calling for Fushi to return in the clearest form. When the soldiers were waving their hands to fend off the Naka's attack, Fushi arrived in time, shielding them all, and then used lava to burn them to nothing. A spark of hope emerged. Everyone rejoiced, and they abandoned the idea of surrendering. At that moment, a girl from the group tried even harder to save him from the cannon fire. But suddenly, she was shot by an arrow from behind, fired by the knockers in the form of Pandora. As for Echo, she hid herself, trying to commit suicide but failed, because the parasitic creature now had the shape of Fushi as a boy. It stopped her, even threatening, "Don't think you can escape," after dealing with several issues related to the knockers. Fushi woke up in shock. He realized he was in Bon's body. Thanks to the ability to observe souls from this body, Fushi saw the ghost of the prince. The prince asked Fushi to go outside to witness something surprising. As he opened the door, a ray of hope expanded. At the same time, all of his teammates were gathered around, rejoicing that he had revived. In this surprise, Fushi accidentally followed Macha's instructions, resurrecting each person one by one. The loneliness and sorrow that had been with him for so long were finally rewarded with tight hugs from his loved ones. Bon stepped forward and apologized to Fushi for the things he had kept hidden from him all this time. He hadn't been able to decide the right moment to speak up. Since childhood, Bon had been able to see souls. Among them was Toneri, and it was thanks to her that Bon had come to know the immortal being. He also realized that when people die, they must choose: either go to heaven, where all dreams come true, or remain in the mortal world. Everyone here had chosen to stay because they loved Fushi. After that, Bon decided to take a gamble and gave his abilities to the immortal being. Luckily, a miracle occurred. Fushi regained all his memories and forms of those here, by seeing their souls. Even though knockers had taken his original form, Fushi sensed Echo's footsteps with knockers clinging tightly to her hands. Somewhere in the kingdom, people were discussing what to do to counterattack the enemy. Fushi remained the same, sitting in position and focusing on expanding his territory. This also increased his sensing ability. Guru quickly found the knockers in the form of Perona committing a crime. So he spat fire and defeated it in an instant, while also returning its essence to Fushi. Everyone took turns supporting, helping everyone in Grand Guild. The resurrection of his old teammates had put him at ease, and it also helped significantly improve his territory expansion ability. Now, he could easily defeat the knockers machines from a distance, gradually eliminating all the knockers in the Grand Guild city. Meanwhile, Echo's knockers were trying to escape, so he informed Kai to quickly approach and rescue her. Just as the knockers were about to escape, Kahaku appeared in time to invite it back into his body. Suddenly, Kai appeared just in time, quickly shooting down all their essences and saving Echo. When he saw Kai, Kahaku was very happy, because Fushi had returned. So, he asked Kai to deliver the letter to Fushi, and then left with the knockers that had been parasitizing his face. Kai returned. Give this letter to Fushi. In his mind, the immortal being knows that Kahaku apologizes for the recent events and announces the Guardian Corps will sever ties with him. But if help is needed, they will always be ready. After reading the letter, Fushi is led outside by Bon, where all the souls of the people and the Ryo warriors are waiting. They wish for the immortal being to be revived with Bon's powers. Previously, Fushi needed to make contact with the dead to accomplish this, but now that condition is no longer necessary. As they wished, Fushi begins the moment of resurrection for all the Grand Guild residents to return to the battle, pushing back with the army. During this process, Fushi regains the forms of Shin and Ugoi that were lost before. Additionally, he senses the Grand Guild prince returning from the distant outer city. At this moment, the number of knockers continues to decrease, while the Grand Guild people continue to increase. Until evening falls, the sound of swords and blades gradually fades, leaving only the sound of the flowing stream and the noise of carts moving debris. When the dawn breaks, the entire population suddenly realizes they have won. After the fierce battle with the knockers, the citizens of Grand Guild rejoice, knowing that the dark days of their lives are over. However, at that time, Messer and the Immortal group were exiled from the country by the Grand Guild prince for 10 days for the crime of sabotaging the kingdom. The prince is forced to do this to protect them from the extremist faction of the Bennett cult. Especially with the rumors about the events here spreading, everyone gathers together for a family meal. Enjoy the peaceful moment. They share with each other their personal dreams and aspirations that they wish to fulfill once everything has passed. When asked about his dream, Fushi hesitated a little and said that he wanted to fulfill the dreams of everyone here. Therefore, bringing peace is essential. He feels that none of the dreams of the people he loves could come true if the world remains immersed in chaos. At the same time, Fushi also delivered the sad news about Echo's death due to injuries sustained in the battle with knockers. This only strengthened his resolve to create a peaceful world, where he could revive everyone and live happily with them. However, the little girl March realized that this also meant Fushi would once again have to say goodbye to her and the others. Everyone burst into tears, unable to suppress their sorrow. At that moment, Beholder appeared, freezing time to prevent this sorrowful separation. He gave Fushi the chance to say goodbye to his friends. Then he sank deeply into a meditative state. Meanwhile, the Immortal group was preparing to leave Grand Guild, but they couldn't find Toneri's group. When Hario returned to Boo's man's house, he found Toneri holding a vial of poison, looking at March with pain as if he wanted to end her life. The girl had waited so long to live happily with the immortal being. But once again, she had to say goodbye to him. This made her lose the meaning of her existence. Understanding this, Hario took the vial from Toneri, ready to play the villain's role to help her carry out this unfortunate act. Meanwhile, Cam and Guru became the gravekeepers. As for Kahaku, he kept a large amount of explosives, heading towards the Bennett Church to propose a partnership to eliminate the immortal being. When they had discovered that Fushi was still alive, then, at the church's iron furnace, Kahaku, with his undying love for Fushi, threw himself into the molten lava with the parasitic knockers, determined to eliminate all these immoral beings. Even though his consciousness was spreading, the immortal being still received a large amount of identities, which meant that Kahaku and the parasitic knockers had died. He quickly returned to his boy form and revived Bon. In the city of Euralis, many years passed. Hario spread Toneri's book about the immortal being, so that people would not be shocked by the strange occurrences in the world. However, he was killed by those opposing Fushi. Now, Kai returned to serve as a soldier in Euralis, then died from a disease similar to his father's. Messer, due to his reckless lifestyle, died from alcohol poisoning. Guru and Cam sacrificed their lives in the fight against the heretical faction. As for the priestess Toneri, when she returned to Genera, she was cared for by the protector Sandal, then passed away peacefully. Her bones were brought to be buried near the immortal being, just as she had wished. Bon, lying on a bed with his weak, aging body, instructed everyone not to mourn. He believed that he would go to a new world, just as Fushi had said before. And then, he took his last breath. Today's video ends here. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support Oni-chan in the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Love you always.